guys for having me today, and thank you, Elizabeth, for inviting me. We've known each other a couple years now, so you guys are really lucky to have her as a professor. So today I'm going to be talking about my company and how I got where I am today. My company, Futurist, as was already told to you guys, is a software development company, and we focus on immersive technologies like augmented and virtual reality. And a lot of this, I am so used to regurgitating and saying over and over again, talking about virtual reality and augmented reality, I never really get to talk about how I got here. So this is a great way for me to actually kind of take a blast from the past, and actually researching and making this presentation was really fun for me because I realized a lot has changed, and a lot of us as entrepreneurs don't get to really examine our paths until we're way too far out of it. So this has been a really fun process for me, and hopefully my story resonates with all of you and you learn something. Everyone's path is completely different, so I'm not saying mimic what I did. I'm just going to share a few key moments of my life that led me to creating this business and how it's continued to grow, and then where we're going in the future. So starting from the beginning, and now you know this because your colleagues or your classmates did some research on me. But in 2010, I did graduate from Georgia Tech, just up the street there. It's kind of a weird contrast since it's so bright outside, but this is actually a picture of my sister and me at Bobby Dodd Stadium in the mid-90s. So both of my parents went to Georgia Tech. It was kind of a thing. My grandfather went there too. My uncle went there for a little while. My sister, who's here, also graduated from Georgia Tech. So I actually really love Georgia State, but Georgia Tech has been like a family thing for me. That'll help with the contrast. Thank you. So here's me graduating, which was very exciting. But one thing I want to emphasize is whatever you do in college, while it is an amazing experience, do not feel like you have to be stuck to that path. Because I got a degree in international affairs and modern languages. A lot of people say, what is that? It's pretty much a degree where there are a lot of history elements, ethics, different elements of government and diplomacy. So a lot of people go into law or politics or even teaching. I ended up actually getting certified as a Spanish teacher in the state of Georgia. I don't do that now. So whatever you are doing, and actually you guys are already ahead of the curve because you're studying something really cool that's going to be able to give you the tools to blaze your own path. You're not stuck to any one thing. There are going to be a ton of turns along the way. Fast forward ahead to March 2014 was the first time I actually got to experience virtual reality. I had taken a couple paths, of course, as I'm not a Spanish teacher. Unfortunately, that career didn't work out. When I graduated, there was still some issues in the job market, so I pretty much took whatever I could get, and I ended up working in human resources and then transferring that role into a marketing role at the same company. I met my co-founder there, Peter, who you'll see in a lot of these pictures. He has been a virtual reality enthusiast since the mid-90s. He got his first headset in 1996. It is on display in our office. It doesn't work right now, but it actually ran off of VHS tapes, believe it or not. Yeah, and he had the Oculus DK1, so he brought it into the office, and I was immediately hooked. I actually got the opportunity to interview with Oculus, so I kind of just blasted through a ton of research. I read Ready Player One. I tried to read everything I could on Reddit, and I went through months of interviews, all the while Oculus was acquired by Facebook. So it kind of slowed down. It got a little bit, just the communication was lost a little because of all those transitions. And we said, you know what, we don't want to wait around. We want to do something here in Atlanta right now. And we started the Atlanta VR Meetup, which is now XR Atlanta. So we had our first event in July 2014. And that was probably the smartest thing I could have done for my business, was building this community. So I'm doing blast from the past again with some amazing photos of really old VR headsets. And really old for me is 2014. It's not really that old in the grand scheme of things. But our very first graphic was a Georgia peach with a VR headset on, photoshopped onto this lovely image. And we had about 200 people show up to our first event, which we were not expecting at all. In that moment, we realized Atlanta was ready. We had access to some of the hardware. Actually, in our first meetup, which was shown in the last slide, not shown here, we didn't even have positional tracking. We just had the Oculus DK1, which is like a really bad version of the Gear VR. Like it's not even, if you experience it today, you will laugh at it. For those of you who are unaware of what positional tracking is, it's the capability that'll allow you to actually walk around in VR or lean your head side to side and actually have your environment tracked to you. So not having that makes you feel a little sick. Luckily, we had people come back after the first event, even though many of them probably felt sick. It's amazing to actually see people continue to come back over the years, because this was our second meetup. Like these three people here, Bobby, April, and JD, like they come to almost every event, and they have been doing so for the past 4 years. And there are a lot of people like that around here. So we're really fortunate to have grown this community up into over 1,000 members now. And it not only ended up being a great way to grow the community, it also was a business development tool for us. So in starting by educating people and by just getting really excited about the technology, we were able to set ourselves ahead of the curve. We were able to establish ourselves as the experts, as people who knew what they were talking about from all of my endless nights of reading Reddit. So we were able to just kind of take the bull by the horns and say, this is us, we are starting this community, and it has grown from there. And that actually ended up getting us contacted by a lot of really interesting people. So that leads us to the day that changed everything. And I say everyone has a day like this if you're an entrepreneur. It's the day that you're like, this is it, I've got it, I'm going with this, and I'm gonna roll with it. How many of you guys are thinking about starting your business or already have? A lot of you? So if you haven't experienced that day already, you will, and you will know what it is. And for me, that was October 26, 2014, which also happens to be Peter, my co-founder's birthday. But he was gracious enough to sacrifice his birthday for a business meeting with a lady who, her name was Lydia, and she worked at Emory, and she was working with a lot of the people at Virtually Better, who maybe some of you know. And she was nice enough to bring us in and show us some of the older headsets, and Peter got really excited about this one because there's actually a postage stamp that has this headset on it from decades ago. And we got to see all these really cool experiences about how they're treating phobias with VR. And while we already knew that there were legs and that it was going somewhere, this really gave us that aha moment of that this is so much beyond gaming. This is something that we can take and create whatever we want to with it. And it was this day that in the parking lot after the meeting, Peter and I had a discussion, and I said, Peter, do you want to do this for real? And he said, really? And I was like, yeah, I'm serious. He's like, I have trust issues. I was like, I do too. And and then we started our company. So it really does, it does happen. I mean, it happens like that. And you know, it definitely takes time. It takes a ton of work, but there will be that moment when you realize this is what you really want to do, and then you'll put in everything you have. So after you have that lovely aha moment, it's time to get serious. You actually have to ask yourselves the hard questions, and this is kind of what my parents did to me, because at this time, I was only 25. I'm still not very old, but 25-year-old, like I'm thinking back, my sister's 25, I'm like, wow. That was a lot of stuff to do for a 25-year-old, and a lot of people start their companies even younger than that. Many of you might do that. So I had to ask myself some real responsible questions. Do you have a defined plan? I ended up making a business plan, and I had charted out the next 3 years, and it had changed drastically over those 3 years, but at least I started with something concrete with goals in mind. How are you going to make money? That's probably one of the more important questions, because if you really are starting a business, you have to do some sort of exploration into how you're actually going to make money. A lot of companies are able to prove that they will make money down the road to get upfront financing. A lot of people, like we did, have to bootstrap it and really just build upon what you've created and slowly grow over time. But you got to figure out how you're going to do it. And for us, it was just doing custom development, custom software development for brands in these mediums. Who are your customers going to be? That's probably just as important as how are you going to make money. And a lot of people, I'm not sure if you're going through this in any of your class on customer discovery. Oh yeah, so you'll get to learn all about that unless you've already gone through that part. But the new class. Okay, we'll take that class, guys, because it's very important. There are a lot of great books about it. It's actually something that when we went through this process and did customer discovery, we were able to take a lot of the techniques in finding our customers and bring those to our customers. So now we do a session on innovation discovery with our customers using a lot of the same practices, and they'll pay us to do it for them. So a very important process, and if you can nail that, you're really golden. What people are going to be involved, and that's not just what people are going to work with you, it is who is going to be involved, because you may have a spouse or significant other, you've got family members, you've got friends, whether they like it or not, they're going to be involved. My husband's been very supportive this whole time. He and I met about maybe 3 weeks before our very, very first Atlanta VR meetup. So he has seen a lot of stuff happen with me. Definitely been supportive, but there's a lot of stuff that they're not going to understand as well, and you have to be okay with that. If you're going through this process, I would encourage you to find other entrepreneurs to talk to, because it can be very lonely sometimes. Not to get morbid on you, but it does get lonely. It's very hard to understand the struggles that entrepreneurs go through without being there yourself, putting yourself in that position, being so passionate about something that you're going to give up so much to get it. So it can be hard on you and your friends and family, but I would just say keep your line of communication open and surround yourself by supportive people, and it will be a lot easier. How will you promote your business? That's also important. We actually don't have salespeople because we do all of our lead generation through marketing and events. So everyone's different. You might want to post flyers all over the school if you're doing something like a meal delivery service where your target is students, and that's just a guerrilla marketing campaign with flyers. You might actually want to pay for booth space at an event where you have a very specific customer that you're trying to get attention. So there are so many different ways to promote your business. It just really depends on what is right for you. And is the market ready? This was the hard one for us because we are in emerging technologies, and they were not necessarily ready when we started the business. It was extremely hard to find work up front. We ended up doing a lot of really, really small projects at first, a lot of prototypes, rapid prototyping, because people weren't actually ready to pull out the big budgets for this technology. Luckily, things have changed, but a lot of that has gone into the education. So back when, at the beginning of this, I was talking about educating your customers and educating the market, that can help your business grow. The better you are able to educate people about it, it kind of works as its own sales tool. So I would definitely recommend evaluating your market before starting off. And another thing to do, and this is specific for my company, but looking really deep into what actually goes into your product. So for us, while maybe software development or what we're doing with interactive technology development just seemed initially like a really cool game design that we're just making look like a business application. There is a lot that goes into it, from the creative to the storytelling to hardware and software design, audio, asset management, asset development, all of it. And it takes a lot to go into these projects. So really assess not what you're doing, but how you're getting there, how you're creating it, and all of the little components so you can start to fill in the pieces. So with all of this in place, what happened next for us? So in October 2014, after that lovely day, we ended up starting the company ATL VR. So it was not called Futurist at first, it was called ATL VR, and it was because we were only doing virtual reality development, which has now changed quite a bit. But we ended up wanting to establish ourselves in Atlanta, and it was going to be great for SEO. Anytime anyone searched Atlanta virtual reality, we came up. So it ended up working out really well. We ended up launching our very first program called Virtual Runway in 2015, which I will go into in a little bit, in February, and that was pretty much our debut to the world. So we spent months developing this and creating something that we were proud to show to everybody, to really put our stake in the ground. And then in September 2015, we moved out of our home offices and started our first actual office, which was really exciting, somewhere we could actually bring clients in, give them demos, and all of that. But with the Virtual Runway project, I want to talk about creating your first client. So not selling your first client, but creating your first client. Oh, the door has blown open. I think a ghost has entered. Ooh, it's ATLVR, come back to haunt me. Thank you. So instead of selling a paying client, which definitely put value on your work. I'm not saying give things away for free because it's really not a good idea. It devalues what you're doing. But for us, no one even knew what virtual reality was. So we had to figure something out. So we decided to create our first client by going to a fashion show that I had worked with in the past, which was a nonprofit, Easter Seals of North Georgia. They put on every year. It's a competition with 10 up-and-coming designers in Atlanta. It's actually kind of funny how I'm involved with them because their second year I was a designer because, of course, add to Spanish teacher and everything. Amateur fashion designer was on my list. So I actually got to compete and I was in the top 10, which was cool. And then the year after that, I actually got to walk the runway for another designer, so that was great as well. So I had a good relationship with these people. And I said, well, why don't we do something that's virtual for them? So we pitched them this idea of creating a virtual runway experience where we would actually film the models in 3D on a green screen and then bring them into a virtual environment. So it'd be the real models in the real clothes, but in a virtual environment in a VR experience. And you could actually customize it so you could see the looks and the fashion styles that were most relevant to you. And to tie it in even more, it was only accessible to VIP ticket holders, which we knew were the big spenders. And it featured the fashions of the previous year's winner. So we were able to really get hype for him, get hype for the event, and get hype for us all in one beautiful little package. It took quite a bit of effort and a couple months to develop, but it ended up working out great. And if any of you are considering doing this as your first project and really having some sort of debut piece that you're creating, these are the key qualifying elements I would absolutely recommend you think about. The first is access. So if you're creating something like this, what is the access you're getting? For us, it was the VIP ticket access. We were able to be at this very high-end event in Atlanta. Only VIP ticket holders could view our experience. Also interest. So it's got to interest you. It's got to align with what your company is actually trying to do. Again, we were making immersive experiences. We wanted to bring different worlds that were not gaming into this virtual environment, so it ended up working out great for us. The audience, which actually that kind of ties into access as well. Who are you showing it to? Are they the right people? Press. So if you're doing something of this magnitude, what kind of press are you generating from it? We were lucky enough to be picked up for several different articles ahead of the show, ranging anywhere from local to international. Like there was one publication in the UK and another one in Australia that picked up the story because it was the first ever virtual runway experience. So it was great for press and even some of the VR outlets like VR Focus picked it up. And then portfolio. Make sure that it's going to be a good portfolio piece for you guys. You don't want to create something that's just a throwaway that doesn't actually matter, that's not going to help you get more work. So when you're evaluating this, make sure it's actually going to help you get more work. And because this went off without a hitch, more or less, the snowball effect went into place. So the snowball effect is something that I am very happy happened to me, but it can happen to anybody if you just get that one right opportunity. It's where you take that opportunity and just keep building and building and building and building and building until you have something much, much bigger. I am emphasizing staying focused during this time because it is very easy to let that snowball run away from you or run away with you, and you will turn into someone you don't like the looks of. But if you stay focused and keep aligned with what your mission is and what your goals are, it really is the best thing that can happen to you. It's one of the reasons that we were able to get so far by bootstrapping our company. I got invited to do a really cool brain scan thing where they put goo on my brain. I got to meet Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs. He came over to our office and did an amazing filming of A Day in the Life of Us. It never went to air, I'm very sad. I got named Kick-Ass Women of VR. That was awesome. I got to be in the newspaper. We got ranked one of the top 10 innovative companies in Atlanta. Again, written up about the fashion stuff. I went to Oculus Connect. Some of you are wondering why it says this is how you die in the corner. It's because we got invited to a lot of really exclusive industry VIP experiences. Insidious was doing a promotional tour of their VR experience, and they invited us to come a day early while they were doing setup and meet the developers, and got to experience it first before everyone else. And I am really scared plugging my ears, because if I don't hear it, it's not as scary. They make you walk through a haunted house before and after the actual VR experience, which is maybe scarier than the VR experience itself. But luckily, I did have this snowball effect happen to me, and it was really easy to lose focus during that time. Things just kept happening, opportunities kept coming, and I kept taking advantage of all of them. I kept doing them, but I wasn't really doing them with a plan in mind. I just said, oh, we'll just keep building, but to what end? So that's where I started to get really, really focused, and what I'm calling disrupting the balance, because it was just a nice, happy place. We got clients. I was in a comfortable place, which is a bad place to be if you're an entrepreneur, and I realized that things were happening so fast, but my company's growth was not actually happening fast enough. Even though I got invited to do all these amazing things, it wasn't necessarily benefiting the company, and I had to take a step back and look and see what was actually going to help my business. So this is kind of leading up to today. We ended up moving into a new office, which is our current office. Hopefully some of you will be able to stop by sometime, but it's on Traybert Avenue, which is right by Monday Night Brewing in West Midtown. It's a beautiful space, and we chose it because we wanted our office to be a business development tool for us. While our first office was great, it was kind of dark, and it was very lofty, and just didn't have that professional face that I wanted to show to the world for some of our customers, and we actually have seen significant difference in how our clients perceive us since moving into this new office. In January of this year, we started planning to scale. So I realized that the best thing I could do was replace myself if I wanted to scale, because I am only one person. So enters Jane, who is an awesome person. She actually went to Georgia State, woohoo! And she came on as an account manager, so that I no longer had to baby the projects once they were already sold. I could continue growing and focusing on operations and all of that. So starting to put people in place, key individuals in place to allow our business to scale was extremely important. And then now, the growth plan is in action. So we now are up to about 12 to 15 people depending on the day, and we have this lovely picture from last night because my company was a top 3 finalist for the Technology Association of Georgia's Millennial Culture Leader of the Year. We didn't win, but that's okay, because my employees believe it, which is more important to me than awards. But the growth plan is now in action to where I have a solid plan. I know where we're going. I know how many people we're going to need to get there, and I know what kind of clients I need to grow. Well, through this whole process, things have gotten easier. A lot of things have gotten harder, and that's something you'll always have to expect. Nothing is ever, as you turn over one task that may be something you don't need to do anymore, 10 more are coming down the road that you have to put equally or more attention on. So it's an exciting place to be, but there are never dull moments where I work. And I think I heard someone say this before I even came to talk to you guys about not stopping learning. And I'm glad that you all practice that. I'm glad that's a mission here, because that's one of mine. And not only just on the learning side, but teaching as well. I am able to learn better when I teach. So for me, that's how I learn. But paying attention to what's next is extremely important. We get new technology all the time. You guys have amazing access to technology in this building. We love collaboration with those around you. We have a lot of people with more experience. We've got one person who is about 20 years of experience in the field, with 15 years at Lockheed doing interactive training simulations. And then we have another guy who graduated from Kennesaw State 2 years ago, and they talk to each other like peers. There is no, I'm better than you, I'm more experienced than you, therefore I'm going to talk down to you mentality where we are. We all work collaboratively, and we all learn from each other no matter what level we're at. If someone has a better idea, don't be too stubborn to drop yours. That's actually something that I work on every day. I sometimes can be a controlling person, and in some ways you have to be when starting a business. You have to make sure everything is in line. You have to watch it and keep a very tight ship. But if someone does come up with something that is better, it's okay. Like you want that. You want people to come to the table with new ideas. You want diverse opinions. You want people from different backgrounds to be able to grow a business with you. So surround yourself by people that you trust, but also who are not or smarter than you. So never be the smartest person in the room is my last one. I'm sure every single person in here has something that they are better than one person at, but none of us is the smartest person in this room, and we all need to remember that, and we all need to learn from each other. So that's how we try to work every day, and it's been able to work for my business, and I really feel that this will work for any business as far as just growth and keeping talent. It's a lot cheaper to keep talent than to hire new talent, so you want to keep the people you're close to. And then the last part of this journey for me has been to represent myself well, and not just myself, my whole company. We all take pride in what we do. We're all very proud of our work. We like swag. A little swag does go a long way, and it can actually make you look a little bigger than you are. We have a pretty solid social media presence and some really nice swag, including these backpacks that we got before CES this year. And it's crazy how people look at you differently just because you peacock, like you show very well. You exude that you're a great company, and if you believe it, they'll believe it. So being passionate about what you're doing and exuding your brand and being proud of your brand is extremely important, and people will take notice. And here's us all on the 4th of July looking patriotic, but it was the best picture I knew where a lot of people were wearing their futurist shirts. So that's pretty much how I got here. We are continuing to grow. We hopefully will be adding additional staff later this year. We're finally at a place where we have a growth plan, but again, as you have heard, a lot has gone into it. We went very zigzag path, and it has been a journey, I will say, but a really great one, and I just want you all to know, if you're considering going down this path, you are not alone. Things are going to not work out, and then things will, and it's one of the best things you'll ever do. So, questions? Yes?
Do you guys focus mainly on like entertainment applications, or have y'all like tried like venturing into like learning, other stuff like that?
Right, so he's asking, for those of you if you didn't hear, what type of applications does our business focus on? We primarily do training and marketing applications, so we do a lot of product visualization, we do on-site assistance with augmented reality and digital overlays onto machinery. We also do some, let's see, I'm trying to think. We haven't really been doing as much 360 video lately. We used to do that for touring, but a lot of people have stepped away from that now that it's more accessible to people to do themselves. So yeah, I'd say the marketing and training is probably the biggest. Yes?
First of all, great speech.
Thank you.
You made a lot of valid points, again, that I really love. One of my follow-up questions would be, at which point in the process of expanding, like you said, you get the workload, but then you want to grow your company, do you decide that you have enough input to have output, as in to pay other people? So, like, where does that balance?
Yeah, and when I was first starting the company, probably the first 8 months, I had another job while I was doing it. So I switched from my one job where I met my co-founder to a contractor position, just so I'd have more flexibility. But we both kept working at least for the first 8 months. I would definitely say rely heavily on contractors until you can really support full-time employees. And the full-times came when we started signing longer-term deals. So when we were just doing project basis, where it would be maybe a 3 to 6 month project here or there, and then we started getting into one. The first one that we did that with was with Georgia Pacific and their Dixie Cup team. So we created an augmented reality experience with their Dixie Cups. That one was about a 2-year engagement. And at that time, I knew that I would at least have the financial stability to make it, 2 years. And once I had that, I could start focusing on bigger jobs because it wasn't just like hustle, hustle, hustle till you get the next little thing. It was being able to take the time and the sales process to get the bigger jobs. And then it just kind of got bigger and bigger from there. So I would say contractor until you have some long-term commitment from your clients.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any type of marketing strategies that you have done that help improve your business?
Yeah, so he's asking any type of marketing strategies to improve our business. We have been pretty active in pushing our social media channels, which is interesting because our clients don't find us on social media, but when we do talk to them, they check it out. So where that may not be where we're getting our leads, they're going to be going on there and making sure we're a legitimate company with some sort of history and footprint. Again, also with the office, they'll come to our office and make sure that we're not working out of a cardboard box. For a lot of growing businesses, that's great because there are so many co-working spaces now. And those give you, the resources of having a solid, really pretty office without having to pay a bunch. But yeah, speaking at conferences has been a big one for us. We'll find specific industries that we want to work in, and then we'll work to get a speaking engagement at those conferences. Because VR and AR was so new a couple of years ago, it was a lot easier to get those engagements. People would be like, oh, you want to talk about that? Okay, we'll give you a spot. And that ended up actually being our marketing strategy, was talking in front of an audience of people who could become customers. And then once they had the solid education, it wasn't a sales pitch we were giving, we were just educating about the technology. Then they'd come up and ask more questions, then we talked about their brand, and it would kind of naturally flow into a conversation about what we could do for them.
Doing software development, you're kind of at the mercy of the given hardware at the time. Are there any improvements you'd like to see in hardware? Do you know anyone that's actively working to make better improvements?
Yeah, so the question was, how do you, deal with software development and ever-changing hardware landscape? So whenever we do start a project, we always have very strict requirements that include the phone or device versions as well as what operating system it's supporting. And usually it's 2 years behind when the contract's signed. So we'll give support from that, but if anything new comes out, we don't typically roll forward until we have another contract signed with them, and they understand that. We're very clear up front about our method there, so there are no questions. It doesn't come up that, oh my gosh, the Apple keynote was this week, can you please integrate ARKit 2.0? Like, you could pay me more. So as long as, we're very, we write it all out, it's in the contract, everything is very solidified, and I would recommend if you are in the software development field, doing that too. We have our own R&D department that's a small group within our company that always is focusing on learning what's new, but we don't implement it into client projects until they pay us. Yes?
In the beginning, you mentioned that you and your partner had trust issues. How did you guys tackle that and then split tasks in order to scale?
Yeah, so I would say our trust issues were general trust issues, not necessarily with each other. But that can actually happen to a lot of people, especially if you're going to business with a friend or family member, which you probably shouldn't do. Luckily, he and I were not super close. Like, we had just known each other for several months, so it wasn't like we were extremely close. But we did set some guidelines ahead of time that I would be the business person and he would be the technical person. So because of his background and he went to Full Sail University and focused in digital media, and he was doing trading animations at the time when we were working together. And then I had a marketing background, and my degree at Tech had some international business courses, so we decided that we would work to our strengths, and luckily our strengths made a pretty even balance. And those strengths still have carried through to today. He is actually the one heading up our R&D department and always checking out what's new and keeping the rest of the team informed when those new things come out, how we can fit them into our business, and then all of the operations and sales and finance is still on me. So establishing that up front and actually having a conversation about that is very important.
Have you guys considered offering internships for students who have interested in VR, possibly volunteering?
Yeah, the question was, have we considered doing internships? We have, and we've had a couple in the past. Right now, we don't physically have the space for more people, so we're in the process of moving. I know. So maybe after that, we have more space, we would definitely consider it. I know that my main project manager, DeGratier, has a lot of experience with interns. He's the guy who worked for Lockheed. He loves that, so we'll work towards it. We just have to figure out where to put you. Yes.
So talking about your clients, how long did it take you to kind of get a grasp on like who and what your client like was, and how did you guys keep tapping into like those type of clients where they keep coming back?
Yeah. So he's asking how do we actually tap into the clients we wanted to work with, and then how do we keep them coming back? Is that right? Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, the long-term contracts was a goal, trying to work towards more long-term contracts. So we would do an initial contract that was pretty short-term, maybe about 2 to 3 months, to try and get them on the hook. That was smaller, maybe more consulting and technology road mapping and all that. And then we would transition that into a larger contract. So we would pretty much earn their trust and establish a good working relationship, also getting into their system. So a lot of these larger companies, if you're in the system, you're good, but it takes 6 months to a year to get in the system. So we would have issues and hurdles going through that process, but really it's, if you can get maybe a handful of very large companies and get them in their system and get them to like you, you are set. So it was not focusing on a bunch of different areas. It was finding people who actually wanted to implement this technology. So we would be talking to them at conferences or hear something about them just from talking within Atlanta, or even, you know, seeing online or seeing them as speakers at other conferences and getting in there that way, and then starting the relationship and exploding from the inside. Yes.
My last combined to, what type of, do you know what type of software, well of course you know, what type of software that you put in your VR set that you're using, and also what type of companies have you had collab with in the past, if you know?
Yeah, you're asking about what the actual experiences have been that we've created, or the actual file types that we put in VR?
Actual file types that you're.
Oh, okay. Cool. So we do all of our development work in the Unity platform, and we have a lot of other elements that go into that, but Unity is the main one. You can actually just export as an executable file. If you're doing something that's mobile-based, it would be an app file, but it's very easy now to export with these programs into a VR format. And then we did some prototyping with the Weather Channel. Again, we worked with Georgia Pacific. One of our bigger clients right now is JLG, who makes aerial lift platforms. So all the scissor lifts that you see, or the boom lifts around construction in Atlanta, half of those or more are probably JLG. We've also worked with some real estate developers in Florida. We've done some work with nonprofits in the VA hospital with therapy. So it's really kind of been a widespread, but it's been all centered back around the technology. Okay.
I wonder if you can tell us what is the problem that you're solving for the customers?
Yes, a lot of the stuff with training is efficiency. So with the training that's pre-work, so before they actually get on the job, it's saving them time and safety errors later. It's reducing waste on materials. It's reducing travel, things like that. With the on-site assistance applications that are usually augmented reality that are on-site, we are allowing them to have easier access to digital information. We also have a solution that does remote troubleshooting for a technician on site, for example, who is able to contact a person anywhere in the world and be able to have their augmented reality annotations stuck to their world on site so they can kind of guide them through any sort of process. But a lot of it drives back to efficiency. And then on the marketing side, the product visualization tools are more for companies who either have an abstract product or a very, very large product that they can't physically show to people before they sell it. So helping them increase sales by allowing their customers to see their products. Yeah. Yes.
Do you only do contract work, or do you also do projects for your own commercial?
We have a couple of projects that we have done internally that we are considering bringing to some sort of commercialization. So the question was, do we just do work for clients that's custom, or do we have our own products? We actually created an experience that we released, we did our field test at DragonCon in the Trek Track, where it's an interactive scavenger hunt that's completely digital. It's run off of an app, and then physical beacons or Bluetooth micro-location enabled devices are at different places all around Atlanta. And we had a lot of great success with that, so we're in the middle of repackaging it to sell to hospitality resorts, cruise ships, anything like that, or conferences, so that people can have an easier way finding their way around, and then incentivize people to get to different locations. That one's more of an interactive technology experience. It doesn't necessarily have AR or VR involved, but one of the things that we do have enabled in this next version is AR stickers. So everywhere you go, you collect different AR stickers or characters, and you're able to actually interact with them through augmented reality. And then what I was describing earlier with the remote troubleshooting and being able to see what the technician on site is seeing and then annotate in AR on top of that, that's another thing that we are licensing out to other customers. Yes.
This may be different now that you have a team, but going back to maybe your contractual project periods, how did you balance, or what, on average, how many clients or brands would you manage or projects would you manage at one time so that it wasn't overwhelming, but you're still in the space of wanting more work because you're hustling, but how do you balance so that you don't let things fall short and have too many things going on at one time?
Sure. Yeah, we would probably, it's actually very similar to what it is now. It's just a different type of project. So I would say about 2 to 3 projects at a time. I think at the most we had 6. But now with the bigger projects, it's still 2 to 3, just because they're so big and so long term. Yes.
I don't understand actually a little bit about
Hi.
this.
What is it?
Behind it.
Yeah.
How did you come up with it?
Yes. So yeah, I didn't even talk about the rebrand. I told you that we used to be ATLVR, but it was right before. Well, no, it was after we moved to the other office, about a year. So 2017? No, 16. It was summer of 2016 we changed the name, and it was because we had recently started getting augmented reality requests from some of our customers, so we decided we could no longer be ATLVR. We also started getting customers outside of Atlanta, and we didn't want to be constrained to our city, even though we love it very much. So we decided to change it. We went through a lot of different ideas. We settled on Futurist because in Latin it literally means future, and we always want to be headed to the future. So while AR and VR are our specialty today, and while we believe that they will continue through the future, if there are other technologies that come in and end up being a great way to have an interactive experience or are amazing for training, then we would implement those. I mean, even thinking about technologies like artificial intelligence, that's something that we're hoping to pull into our suite of services someday. The bird is actually, it went through a lot of different versions. It ended up looking this way because we just wanted to simplify it. We had to have something that was pretty easy to print, so we ended up simplifying it, but it actually is a phoenix. If you saw its whole body, you'd understand. But it has a pixel for an eye to kind of throw to our digital nature, and the Phoenix is because we were ATLVR and we wanted to keep some symbol of Atlanta in our brand.
Oh, I just want to talk about how the reason how I figured it was a phoenix is because when phoenixes die, it's like a symbol of like rebirth. So it's always like the constant future. It's always
That's
changing.
right.
So that's why I figured it was a phoenix, and the fact it's red.
Yay! That makes me very happy. Yeah.
So, it's not really a question, it's a comment.
Okay.
But I really find it fascinating that you, because it's sort of something that we're studying in this class, which is that you started off building a community and building a customer. I think both of those are really interesting, concepts, or newer concepts for how, companies get built, and I just think it's really fascinating that you did that. And I also love the fact that you don't even have salespeople, but it's like these speaking events, and you're building like an authentic community. And I mean, Annie already talked about, like your first prototype was at an event for Easter seals, and so you're authentically engaged with the community, authentically giving back to the community, like the women in VR, girls in VR, and all of that. So it's just exemplifies everything we're trying to learn in this class.
That's so
In
sweet.
theory, but here it is in practice and actually working, which is just beautiful.
I guess one more comment, so your head will be too big to leave the room. I really like the play on of the future us, because I thought you were literally saying future us, and for someone on the outside, it's like, us, that's me too, so what is this? And it's, again, from a PR standpoint, it's very provoking and engaging outside of the Phoenix.
Thank you, thank you. I'll give you a little story since we got 2 more minutes. Is why my email address will soon be Annie@futurist.com. This will still work. But we recently went through a website acquisition. Yes. We now own futurist.com. That was a crazy experience. But because we couldn't have it, and when we first rebranded, we were trying to figure out something to where we could actually have a domain name. Like, all of it goes down to what domain name is still going to be available in 2018, So we ended up finding out that we could get a .us email or URL, and it would be future.us, and it would actually say futurist, which we thought was so clever. It has confused people so bad, but it looks nice and it takes less characters. We tried to buy futurist.com 2 years ago, and we went through a broker, and they did not want to sell it, and then they gave us an absurd price, and we said, oh no, we cannot afford that. Later on, I guess this was probably 3 months ago, I reached out on LinkedIn to the guy who I found out owned it on the Whois database, and he had retired, and he had a company called Futures Corporation in the 90s. Actually, I think they started in the 70s, but they pretty much developed email. So I think they sold some patents to Microsoft. It was pretty cool. I'm like, wow, with that history, we're bound for success. So he ended up parting with it, but I still had to pay a pretty penny, but it was not $20,000, it was $5,000. And for a URL, that's just one word, a .com, that's actually pretty reasonable. So think about your URL when you are making your business, and whenever you actually have the financial means to get a better one, go for it. So we're in the middle of that transition.